Hey everybody, DJ here, and this is going to be a video on how to optimize your CPU for content creation. We're going to be talking about how to get a little bit extra oomph out of your CPU for when you need it for rendering or when you're working on projects, whether it's CGI or editing or compositing, any sort of content creation, and then also how to sort of save your energy usage on your computer so that when you don't need it, you can also cut a few dollars off of your electric bill. But of course, before we begin, if you could please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out and it's super easy for you to do. We also have a Discord server that you can jump on and ask questions or post any of your personal work or renders. And we also have a Patreon if you would like to consider donating to cover the cost of making these videos, like the fine people that you see scrolling at the bottom of the screen right now. Both of those links are in the video description below. So you can see here I'm on Windows, and I'm not really sure if all this works for Linux. I'm sure that there are some options available, and I think QuickCPU actually has some options for you, but I'm going to be doing Windows because that's what I have. Okay. So we're going to be using Quick CPU for this. I'm going to show you exactly how this works. But before we begin, what we really want to do is we want to look at your power plans. Okay. So if you go down here into the search and you type in control panel and you go in there, you can see that there's all these options. Go right here where it says power options. And you should see at least one of these in here. And a lot of times, what you get from the manufacturer, if it's a pre-built, or sometimes even if you build your own, you might not have done this. There's these sort of like power plans, and a lot of times, what companies will do is they will set a balanced amount of usage, where basically it's like, well, we can run the CPUs at a high frequency, but we don't want to do it too long because we want to be able to give you the power savings and the sort of like advertised wattage and all that kind of stuff. So often you'll have this balanced one here, and you might have already set a high performance and power saver and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't see those, that's fine. We can really easily add one. So if you go over here to create power plan, you can create one. So you can click on, let's say, high performance. You can type this in here, and let's just call this high performance test, and click next. And you can see here that just starts off with these, turn off display and put the computer to sleep and stuff like that. So we're going to set this to, I don't know, never. Let's just say that this is a rendering setting that we wanted. So we really don't want the computer to go to sleep. We want it to keep running and never turn it off or go to sleep because we want to be able to render overnight or something. And then you click create, and you can see there we have the high performance test right there. So now that this is created here, let's say that you made one, but you have too many of them and you need to get rid of it. So you might find that it's a little bit weird if you have this selected. So let's say I have this selected and I want to delete this. If I go to change plan settings, you can see that there's really nowhere to delete it. So what you'll do is you'll actually go back, click on a different plan. So, now what's set is the balanced one. And you see there it says high performance test, change plan settings right here. Now you can see I can delete this plan. So what you can do from this point is you can choose whatever the power option is that you've made. You can go in here, click change plan settings, and change some of this stuff, change the advanced power settings if you want, which have a whole bunch of stuff in here that you may or may not understand what all this is. I'm going to hit cancel here, and the thing is that if I hit cancel again, it's going to go back here. I'm going to click on balanced for now. This is an okay way to do it. You'll actually see some performance increases if you do this, but I think that in my opinion, there's a much better way to do this and an easier way, and it's through this software that I'm going to talk about next, which is called QuickCPU. Now, I don't get endorsed by these people, and I'm not claiming any responsibility that if you try to download this, that you might get any sort of virus or whatever. I have never had any problems with this software, and it has never really let me down with what I want to do. So I'm going to show you how you can download this and install it. So if you go onto the internet, look for this here. It's called coderbag.com/product, whatever. The link is going to be down in the video description. You can do a search for Quick CPU, but always be careful when you're trying to download stuff, especially when it's free, because there's always stuff like, if you look on here, there's just ads everywhere. See these little X's? These are ads. And if you click on these download buttons all over the place and you're not careful, you might have a problem. Okay. Because you might start downloading something that you don't want. Okay. So Now, what you'll have to do is you'll have to sort of scroll all the way down and it'll sort of like tell you stuff. And you can see there's just ads everywhere, right? So don't really look at any of this stuff. We're going to go all the way down. So I'm just going to scroll all the way down here. And you can see here there's a release history. It says here release, and there's all of these here. So we're going to download the 64-bit version. So I'm going to click on that. You can see it downloaded right here on the bottom left. And if you go into your downloads folder, you can see I already did this to test it out today. You can go in and you can install it by double clicking on this. And I already have it installed, so I'm not going to do this, but just keep hitting next and you'll see that it'll get installed. Okay. So I'm going to hit cancel there. And we're just going to jump out. So I already have a shortcut on my desktop. If you go down here to search, you can do a search for QuickCPU if you don't have it there, and you can see that it's right here, and you can actually go to the file location there. But let's just double click on this and open it up, and it's going to tell you this right here, like warning you and all that kind of stuff, but whatever. We're going to trust it. So we have it open, and you can see here there's all kinds of stuff going on, all right? And I'm going to try and make this a little bit bigger, and I'll explain to you briefly what's going on. And this is sort of like generic. This works with Intel and with Ryzen CPUs, okay? So you can see here I have an AMD Ryzen Threadripper 3960, and there is a whole bunch of stuff here. So this is basically showing you what's going on with your CPU. You can see that there's a temperature right here. You can see that there's a load that's right here, and you can see that there's a clock. So clock is basically how fast it's running. The load is how much is actually being processed by your CPU, and the CPU temperature is exactly what it is. It's the temperature. Now, I'm not going to like make a guarantee that nothing will ever happen to your computer because I don't know what you're going to do. Okay. But as far as my experience with this software is concerned, I have never run into any issues with it. And I have never blown up a CPU or anything. And I've been using it for many years throughout its different iterations that it's been released. Okay. So, um, you know, nothing that I'm showing you here is going to, as far as I understand, harm your computer or your CPU in any way. Your computer is already set to make sure that it monitors certain frequencies and temperatures, and we're not going in and changing voltage or anything like that with any of your components. So this is basically just unlocking, if you want to call it that, the potential of your CPU to actually do some different stuff. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to look at here, you can see that there's a different system power plans up here. Okay, so you can see there's the ultimate, there's the high, there's a power saver, there's a quick CPU scheme, whatever. Now the quick CPU scheme is automatically created when we click one of these buttons up here. But I'm just going to talk about a couple things. So I have a 24 core, 48 thread CPU. And you can see that there's all of the cores. You can see where it's just called cores. That's really, there's 24 cores, but there's 48 threads. Okay. So you can see there's core 48. Really, it's just, a thread. Now, yours will be different. You might only have 4, you might have 8, you might have 6, whatever it is. Doesn't matter. Basically, what we can do with this is we can set some different things. So you can see down here on the bottom left, you can see that there's called core parking. There's a frequency scaling, turbo boost, and performance. Okay. What we're going to do here is we're going to make a couple different adjustments, and I'm just going to tell you what they do. And if you just kind of look at the graphs here, it should kind of be obvious what's going on. So performance is obvious. It's basically saying how much do you want these cores to work. If it's at 100%, it's going to work harder. If it's at more towards the left side, it's going to not be as high performance. If you look at the core parking, what that does is it basically says, okay, don't use a certain number of cores. And in the older versions, when I actually set this down, you can actually see each and every core up here on the top left. And it would actually show you like which ones were parked at that time and that they weren't being used. Now there's all these bars, which are kind of cool. But anyway, frequency scaling, it basically says how much do you want to use the frequency. So if you put this all the way up, you get more of the frequency, or at least the peak frequency usage. And if you put it all the way down, you get less of that. And then the turbo boost is basically you have a base frequency like you see right here, and there's usually a boost frequency. So, the base frequency is sitting around 3.79 or 3.8, and the boost frequency can sometimes get up to 4.2, depending. Okay, and you can see here that there's the CPU speed and there's the temperature right here and everything else. Okay, and what's really important here when it comes to the amount of electrical usage that's going on is if you look at the CPU package, this is how much energy is being used. So you can see here 85 watts is sort of where it's running at. And then the TDP, which is like the total number of watts that it can use when it's in really high performance, is 280. So, if we wanted to adjust some of these things to make this as high powered as possible, because we're going to do a whole bunch of renders and we just need it to work as fast as possible because we have a deadline, what we can do is go down here and change this frequency and move it up, and take the frequency scaling and move it up, and the turbo boost and move it up. We could do that. But what I think is the easiest thing to do is if you go up to System Power Plan, let's just go to, let's say, Ultimate Performance, and we're going to click this button that says Set as Active. And you can see that down here, a bunch of this stuff just moved up to 100%. Now, if yours didn't, and you picked on the one, or you picked the power plan that you just made, take the performance and move it all the way up, and the core parking, leave this at 100%. Frequency scaling, put it at 100, and the turbo boost and put it at 100, and then click the apply button. And you can see here it says changes successfully applied. So what that means is that now that system power plan will always have that when you change it. So if I go up here and I'm like, you know what, I'm not really doing anything that requires all of this to be going on. I don't need to use that much energy. So let's just change that to back to the balanced one. We can click this that says set as active, and you can see there that the frequency scaling went down, the turbo boost went down, and the performance went down. Now, what I've created is also a power saver one that does more than what it was originally created as. If I click set as active, you can see that I'm using core parking of 2%. That means only 2% of the cores that I have are being used, which is good for me because for the amount of cores and threads that I have on this computer, I don't need all of that when I'm just doing some like web-based, scrolling, or if I'm looking for something, or if I'm playing D&D online with some friends or something like that with Discord. I don't need all of that stuff working. Okay. And I will tell you that sometimes when I'm doing some of the stuff in here, this will make it to where the recording software screws up. So I apologize if that happens. But you can see here that I took the turbo boost all the way down, the frequency scaling is all the way down, and the performance is down to like 1%. Okay. So, and if you actually take a look at the CPU package, the CPU package actually dips quite a bit when I do this. You can see here, there was a dip in the frequency. It went from here down to here. Okay, and that's when I made that change, 3.8 down to 2.2. The easy thing to do also is you can go up here, and this is where it creates this sort of like automatic quick CPU scheme. If you click maximum performance, if you just click this button and then you just click accept, and then click OK, you can see that it went to quick CPU scheme and it applied all of this new performance stuff. And you can see right here that the CPU frequency jumped up, and that means that more energy, see right here, there's 90 watts being used now instead of like 78 or whatever. So that means that there's more of the frequency that's being used, there's more power being used. So the power draw is going up, okay? And the processing power is increasing. So if I didn't want to have that happen, let's say that I was moving over to doing something else, like scanning the internet, or just having a regular discourse with somebody online, or emailing. If you click this button up here, and if you hover over it, it'll tell you minimum performance. And if you click that and you press accept, okay, now you can see that it's going to drop down to all these set at 5% and the performance at 10. And you can see right here again, it's at 2.2 for the frequency, and up here I'm now at like 66 watts. So if you're the kind of person who's very frugal and energy conscious, this is great because it allows you to do all sorts of other things without always pushing your computer to perform at a really really high level. There's so many videos out there talking about performing at a super high level that it doesn't really talk about how to, at least the ones that I've seen, it doesn't really teach you how to like, be conservative with your energy usage when you're not doing things like rendering or working on something that requires that. Okay. And then if you're doing something like, even if you're working on content, but you really don't need to push it for like quick renders or anything, you can always go to the balanced, which up here, you can see it says balanced performance. And if you click that and click accept, okay, you can see that it sort of sets some performance boundaries or parameters. they're a little bit easier to deal with. Okay. So not as high as the super high performance and not as low um, as the minimum performance. Okay. Now, how does this translate to your render speeds? Okay. And what really, what is the real usage of this? So I'm going to show you hopefully, I can get all this on the same screen here. I'm going to show you the difference between your render speed when you have this set on the two, like, polar opposites. So when you have it on a really low setting and when you have it on a really high setting. And everyone's going to have a different result. Yours might be an increase of only a little bit of time, or, you might see something that's very negligible. But with mine, you'll at least see that with this really high powered CPU, doing this helps to make sure that you're actually utilizing the full uh, advantages of your CPU that you paid really good money for. So what I have open here is I have this sort of like text that I created, and if you'd like to learn how to make this, I do have a series on how to make this text. So I'll put a card in right here so you can check it out, and I'll put a link down below. But basically, what this has is the floor has a lot of subdivisions. There's a volumetric that's being done here, and there's kind of like a lot of stuff that needs to be calculated by the CPU. And for the rendering, we're going to set this just for 128, just so that it's a quick render. I have adaptive sampling, and I do have a denoiser in the compositor, so you'll see its speed when it does the denoise and composite. And let's go back to the layout here. And for performance, I have the auto tile size add-on put on, which, just go to edit preferences to add this. 64 by 64 since we're using a CPU. And what we're going to do here is we're going to set this as a render. And I'm going to do the first one. I'm going to do the power saver. So I'm going to go up here and do minimum performance, okay? And so everything has just been dropped. And I'm going to render this out. And we're going to watch to see the speed at which the CPU builds the scene. And then it renders it. And then it composites it. And then we're going to compare the speeds of those two to see, how much faster the other one is. So I'm going to basically go in here. Whoops. I'm going to hit F12 and we're going to see how that works. So hopefully my audio doesn't clip out or anything, but here we go. Okay, so I had a little bit of a mistake in one of my settings. So let's actually properly set this off. So we're going to render this and we're going to see how long this takes with the low power settings. Okay, so you can see here that it took, for this frame to render, it took 3 minutes and 20 seconds. It's still initializing the composite. And there we go, 3 minutes and 40 seconds to do this frame with a denoiser and everything else. So, not the best, considering the size of it and everything like that. For this type of CPU, it's pretty slow. Now, obviously, this is set to the super, low powered, but I'm just using this as an example to show you the extremes of two. So you can see here, this is set for slot 2. So slot 2 is going to be the slow CPU. Let's change this to slot 1. And we're going to change this over here. We're going to go to the high-powered version, accept, okay. And let's go ahead and render this out one more time and just check the differences between the two as far as the speed. Okay, so there you go. You can see here the time was 1:58, 1 minute 58 seconds, almost 1:59. And if we look at the other one here by hitting J, we can swap between slot 1 and 2, and you can see that the lower powered version or the lower powered setting was 3 minutes 40 seconds and 91. So you can see there quite a bit of a difference. Now, obviously, these are the extremes, but I'm sure that if you do this, you will see at least a bit of a difference between your speed. So, of course, after I would do this and I finished up my rendering and everything and I saved it out, I would then set this back to something like a balanced one or something like that. Or if I knew that I wasn't really going to have to do a whole lot, I would set this to a minimum performance. That way, I can surf the net or whatever it is I need to do without using a whole bunch of the energy and it going to waste. So that's pretty much going to be it for this tutorial. Hopefully this helps you if you find that you need just a little bit more performance out of your CPU, or you can get a little bit more speed for your viewport renders or anything like that. For any more tutorials, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you next time on DJ Tutorials.